Rain hammered violently against the towering windows of Ravenshade Manor, each strike of thunder rattling the ancient Victorian estate that stood like a dark king over the cliffs of Blackthorn Hill. Candle flames flickered along endless marble corridors while nervous servants hurried quietly through the halls, afraid to speak above whispers. Whenever Duke Cassian Ravenshade returned from the royal capital in silence, the entire manor trembled beneath his mood. Tonight was worse. A black carriage stopped before the grand entrance as cold rain poured from the heavens. The Duke stepped out without waiting for assistance, his polished boots splashing through puddles across the stone courtyard. His tall frame looked even more intimidating beneath the storm. Dressed in a dark charcoal overcoat embroidered with silver Ravenshade crests, Cassian removed his gloves slowly, his sharp gray eyes unreadable. No one greeted him. No one dared. The head butler lowered his head nervously. "Welcome home, Your Grace." Cassian handed him his coat without a word and walked straight toward his study. The servants exchanged anxious glances. "She's inside already," one maid whispered softly. Another sighed sadly. "Then tonight truly is the end." At the far end of the manor, warm firelight glowed inside the Duke's private study. Lady Elara Whitmore Ravenshade stood quietly near the grand piano beside the window, her hands trembling faintly against the folds of her pale blue gown. She had been waiting for over 3 hours. Outside, lightning illuminated the room for a brief second, revealing her delicate features and exhausted eyes. At 26, Elara possessed a quiet beauty that noble society often overlooked. She was gentle where others were loud, kind where others were cruel. And for 5 years, she had loved a man incapable of loving her back. The study doors opened. Cassian entered without looking at her. "You wish to speak with me," Elara said softly. His expression remained cold. "No. I came because this matter should end tonight." Her heartbeat slowed painfully. Cassian walked toward the desk and tossed several folded papers across its surface. The sharp sound echoed through the room. Elara stared at the documents silently. Divorce papers. For a moment, only rain filled the silence between them. Cassian poured himself a glass of whiskey before speaking again. "Rumors about you have spread through the capital for weeks. I ignored them at first, but I will not allow the Ravenshade name to become a laughingstock." Elara frowned faintly. "You believe those rumors?" "I believe appearances matter." His answer cut deeper than anger ever could. Over the past month, noble society had whispered cruel accusations about the Duchess. They claimed she secretly met another man while Cassian worked in the capital. They called her manipulative, desperate, unworthy of the Duke's name. But none of it was true. Unknown to Cassian, every rumor had been carefully created by Lady Vivienne Moreau, the ambitious daughter of a wealthy marquis who desired Cassian for herself. Elara tried once to defend herself. Cassian never listened. "You could have asked me directly," Elara whispered. Cassian's jaw tightened. "Would your answer change anything?" The question shattered something inside her. For years, Elara had endured his coldness quietly. Their marriage had never been born from love. 5 years earlier, the union was arranged to strengthen political alliances between noble houses. At first, she feared him. The infamous Duke of Ravenshade was known across the kingdom as a ruthless man untouched by emotion. But shortly after their marriage, Elara accidentally witnessed something no one else ever saw. One winter night, she found Cassian kneeling beside an injured stable horse during a snowstorm, carefully wrapping its wounded leg himself while servants stood frozen in fear. Another time, she watched him secretly pay for a poor factory worker's surgery after an accident. He hid his kindness like a shameful secret. And somehow, Elara fell in love with the pieces of humanity he refused to show the world. But Cassian never allowed her close enough to reach his heart. "I fulfilled every duty expected of me," Elara said quietly, forcing strength into her trembling voice. "I protected this family. I respected your name." Cassian finally looked at her directly. "And yet," he said coldly, "I never asked for your affection." Those words struck harder than thunder. Elara lowered her eyes, trying desperately to hold herself together. She remembered countless lonely nights waiting for him beside dying fireplaces. She remembered secretly selling her mother's jewelry to help save Ravenshade Manor when financial disaster threatened the estate 2 years earlier. She remembered sitting beside his ill mother through endless nights while Cassian remained trapped in political affairs at the capital. None of it mattered. To him, she was merely a responsibility. "Pack your things," Cassian said. "This marriage ends tonight." Silence consumed the room. Elara stared at the floor as tears slowly blurred her vision. For years she had promised herself she would never cry before him. Not once. Not even during nights when loneliness felt unbearable. But tonight, something inside her finally broke. A quiet sob escaped her lips before she could stop it. Cassian froze. Elara covered her mouth as tears spilled uncontrollably down her cheeks. Her small frame trembled beneath the candlelight. "I never wanted your title," she whispered painfully. "I only wanted your heart." Cassian's fingers tightened around the whiskey glass. For the first time in years, uncertainty crossed his expression. He had seen women fake tears in royal courts countless times. Manipulation no longer affected him. But Elara's grief felt terrifyingly real. Raw, broken. And suddenly, the room felt unbearably suffocating. Cassian looked away first. Pride built walls around his heart long before Elara entered his life. His father's betrayal of his mother had destroyed any belief he once held in love. Emotion made people weak. Vulnerability invited pain. That was what he believed. That was how he survived. "Elara," he began quietly, but she stepped back before he could finish. "It's all right, Your Grace," she said softly, wiping her tears despite her shaking hands. "You've made your decision." The formal title stabbed deeper than anger. Without another word, Elara turned and left the study. The door closed gently behind her. Cassian remained motionless beside the fire. For reasons he could not understand, her tears refused to leave his mind. Upstairs, Elara locked herself inside her bedroom before collapsing beside the bed in silent agony. Her breathing became uneven as violent coughing overtook her body. A small stain of blood appeared against the white handkerchief covering her lips. Slowly, she reached into the drawer beside her bed and removed a folded medical letter. Her eyes lingered on the doctor's words. "The illness has progressed significantly. Avoid stress and cold environments whenever possible. Time may be limited if treatment fails." Elara closed her eyes. She had hidden the truth from everyone for nearly a year, especially from Cassian. He already viewed her as a burden. She refused to become an object of pity, as well. Outside her bedroom window, rain continued pouring over Ravenshade Manor. By midnight, the household had fallen silent. Elara carefully packed only a few belongings into a small suitcase. 3 dresses, her mother's silver necklace, a book of piano compositions, and the doctor's letter. Nothing else. 5 years of marriage reduced to 1 suitcase. Before dawn arrived, she quietly descended the grand staircase alone. A single maid waited near the entrance, tears filling her eyes. "Your Grace, must you truly leave?" Elara forced a gentle smile. "Please take care of the manor." The maid began crying softly as Elara stepped toward the waiting carriage outside. Rain still fell from the dark sky. Elara paused briefly before entering the carriage and turned back toward Ravenshade Manor one final time. The towering estate stood cold and distant beneath the storm. Once, she believed it could become a home. Now it felt like a prison she had finally escaped. The carriage disappeared slowly into the rain-covered road before sunrise. Hours later, morning light crept through the manor windows. Cassian entered the dining hall expecting silence as usual. But something felt wrong. No fresh flowers decorated the table. No soft piano melody echoed faintly from upstairs. No quiet voice wished him good morning. The emptiness unsettled him more than he expected. A nervous servant approached carefully. "Your Grace." Cassian looked up impatiently. "The Duchess," the servant whispered shakily. "She truly left." The days following Elara's departure passed beneath an endless gray sky. Ravenshade Manor remained as grand and magnificent as ever, yet something essential had vanished from its walls. The enormous estate no longer felt alive. Its marble corridors echoed with hollow silence, and the servants moved carefully as if mourning someone who had died. Duke Cassian Ravenshade noticed it immediately. At first, he convinced himself it was merely adjustment. Nothing more. He had wanted this separation. He had signed the divorce papers himself. Elara's absence should have brought relief. Instead, the manor felt unbearably cold. On the 3rd morning after her departure, Cassian entered the dining hall before sunrise. A silver tray waited neatly at the center of the table, But something was wrong. No fresh flowers. Every morning for 5 years, Elara personally arranged flowers there herself. He stared at the empty vase longer than necessary. A servant quickly noticed his gaze. "Would your grace prefer roses today?" Cassian looked away immediately. "It doesn't matter." But it did matter. Everything suddenly did. The silence during meals felt heavier now. No soft piano melodies drifted from the upper halls at night. No warm candlelight glowed beneath Elara's bedroom door while she read quietly before sleep. The manor had lost its heartbeat. And for reasons he could not explain, Cassian could not escape the memory of her tears. "I only wanted your heart." The words haunted him endlessly. One evening, unable to focus on paperwork, Cassian walked aimlessly through the manor until he found himself standing outside the music room. The door remained slightly open. Inside, moonlight spilled across the grand piano Elara used every evening. Cassian stepped closer slowly. Her sheet music still rested neatly on the stand exactly as she left it. One unfinished melody remained open, delicate notes frozen forever in silence. Without thinking, Cassian touched the piano keys lightly. A soft, sorrowful note echoed through the room. He immediately pulled his hand away. Why did this emptiness bother him so much? Before he could answer himself, footsteps approached behind him. "Still pretending none of this affects you?" Cassian turned sharply. Lord Adrian Vale leaned casually against the doorway, removing his gloves with a sigh. Unlike most nobles, Adrian had known Cassian since childhood and feared him very little. Cassian frowned. "What are you doing here?" "Checking whether my oldest friend has finally lost his mind." Cassian's expression darkened. "Careful, Adrian." Adrian ignored the warning and stepped into the room. "Do you truly believe Elara betrayed you?" Cassian remained silent. That hesitation alone was answer enough. Adrian folded his arms. "The rumors spreading through noble society never made sense to me. Elara barely attended social events unless required. Half the kingdom considered her too gentle for court politics." Cassian's jaw tightened. "Rumors exist for a reason." "No," Adrian replied sharply. "Sometimes rumors exist because cruel people create them." The room fell quiet. Adrian sighed heavily before continuing. "Do you even know what your wife has done for this family?" Cassian looked at him coldly. "Explain." Adrian studied him for a long moment, disbelief visible in his eyes. "You truly never noticed," he murmured. Slowly, Adrian walked toward the fireplace. 2 years ago, when Ravenshade investments collapsed after the northern trade disaster, your estate nearly fell into bankruptcy." Cassian frowned slightly. "I resolved that issue." "No," Adrian corrected. "Elara did." Cassian stared at him. Adrian continued quietly. "She sold most of her personal jewelry collection in secret, including heirlooms inherited from her mother." For the first time, genuine shock crossed Cassian's face. "That's impossible." "I confirmed it myself." Adrian removed several folded documents from his coat and placed them onto the piano. "Bank records. Private transactions. She hid everything to protect your pride." Cassian grabbed the papers quickly. Every signature belonged to Elara. Every sale. Every sacrifice. His chest tightened painfully. "That still doesn't explain the rumors," he muttered. Adrian's expression hardened. "Because the rumors were lies." He placed another document before Cassian. A forged letter. Cassian immediately recognized the handwriting imitation. Lady Vivienne Moreau. She fabricated correspondence between Elara and another nobleman, Adrian explained, then paid gossip circles throughout the capital to spread the story. Cassian's eyes darkened dangerously. "Why?" Adrian laughed bitterly. "Because every fool in the kingdom knows Vivienne wants your title." The room suddenly felt suffocating. Memories began resurfacing one after another. Vivienne constantly criticizing Elara during royal gatherings. Elara remaining silent instead of defending herself. The sadness hidden behind her smiles. Cassian closed his eyes briefly. Had she endured all of it alone? Adrian's voice softened slightly. "There's more." Cassian looked up slowly. "Your mother's nurse resigned last winter because of illness," Adrian said quietly. "Do you know who cared for the Dowager Duchess afterward?" Cassian frowned. "Elara." The answer struck harder than expected. Night after night, While Cassian remained trapped in political meetings at the capital, Elara personally cared for his bedridden mother herself, preparing medicine, reading to her, staying awake through fevers. Cassian remembered several occasions when his mother's health unexpectedly improved. He never once questioned why. A horrible realization settled heavily inside him. Elara had loved him quietly in every possible way, and he had never truly seen her. Later that evening, Cassian sat alone inside his study, unable to breathe properly beneath the weight crushing his chest. The divorce papers still rested on the desk. He stared at them with growing disgust. A sudden knock interrupted the silence. A young maid entered nervously carrying a small envelope. "Your Grace, I found this inside the Duchess's room after she left." Cassian took the letter slowly. The handwriting on the front nearly stopped his heart. For Cassian, his fingers trembled slightly as he opened it. Inside rested a simple folded note. "Your Grace, I apologize if my presence ever became a burden to you. That was never my intention. I know our marriage was built on duty rather than love, and I do not blame you for wishing to end it. Please take care of yourself properly. You often skip meals while working, and the winter cold worsens your headaches. I truly hope you find happiness someday. Elara." Cassian's throat tightened painfully. Even after everything, she still worried about him. Something slipped from the envelope onto the desk. Another document. A medical diagnosis. Cassian unfolded it slowly. The color drained from his face as he read each line. Severe pulmonary illness. Progressively worsening condition. Dangerous coughing episodes. Possible fatal complications. The date at the top revealed she had been diagnosed nearly a year ago. A full year. His breathing became uneven. Suddenly, memories he once ignored returned with terrifying clarity. Elara coughing quietly behind closed doors. Her trembling hands during winter dinners. The exhaustion hidden beneath her smiles. The way she often pressed handkerchiefs against her lips. Cassian gripped the edge of the desk so tightly his knuckles turned white. She was sick, he whispered hoarsely, and he had thrown her out into the storm. For the first time since childhood, Cassian Ravenshade completely lost control. The whiskey glass beside him shattered violently against the fireplace. Servants froze outside the study as furious crashing sounds echoed through the manor. Inside, Cassian stood breathing heavily, grief and rage tearing through him like wildfire. Not rage toward Elara, toward himself. The next evening, noble society gathered inside the royal ballroom for the Winter Crown Gala. Crystal chandeliers illuminated silk gowns and military uniforms, while musicians performed elegant waltzes. Lady Vivienne Moreau stood proudly near the center of the ballroom in an expensive crimson dress, already imagining herself beside the Duke publicly. Then the grand doors opened. Cassian entered alone. The atmosphere shifted instantly. He walked directly toward Vivienne without greeting anyone. She smiled sweetly. "Your Grace. Did you enjoy destroying an innocent woman?" The music stopped. Conversations died immediately. Vivienne's face paled. Cassian pulled the forged letters from his coat and threw them onto the ballroom floor before everyone. "You spread lies about my wife," he said coldly. "You manipulated noble society for personal ambition." Whispers exploded across the room. Vivienne stammered desperately. "Cassian, I only wish to protect. Do not say my name again." The terrifying calm in his voice silenced the entire ballroom. "You will leave the capital by morning," Cassian declared. "If I ever hear another lie regarding Elara Ravenshade, your family name will disappear from noble society entirely." Adrian met him near the entrance. "Where are you going?" Cassian fastened his gloves tightly. "To bring my wife home." Weeks passed as the Duke traveled across the kingdom searching desperately for Elara. He searched rainy train stations where lonely travelers passed beneath clouds of steam. He questioned innkeepers in quiet coastal towns. He visited snow-covered villages hidden deep within the countryside. Everywhere he went, he carried the same growing fear inside him. What if he found her too late? One freezing evening, Cassian finally arrived at a small countryside clinic after hearing rumors of a sick noblewoman traveling alone. An elderly village doctor studied him carefully. "You are searching for a young woman with silver-brown hair?" the doctor asked. Cassian stepped forward immediately. "You've seen her?" The old doctor hesitated before nodding slowly. "She was here weeks ago." Hope surged violently through Cassian's chest. But the doctor's next words nearly destroyed him. "The young lady you seek," he said quietly, "may not survive another harsh winter." Snow fell gently across the quiet countryside village of Evermay, covering rooftops and narrow streets in soft white silence. Unlike the cold grandeur of Ravenshade Manor, Evermay felt warm despite the winter chill. Small cottages lined the snowy roads, chimney smoke curled peacefully into the sky, and children laughed freely without fear of noble rules or royal gossip. For the first time in years, Lady Elara Whitmore Ravenshade finally felt at peace. The village orphanage stood near the edge of a frozen river, surrounded by tall pine trees dusted with snow. Though the building was old and modest, warmth filled every corner of it. Children ran through the halls carrying books and wooden toys while soft piano music drifted from the main room. Elara sat beside the piano near the window, her pale fingers moving gently across the keys. Several children gathered around her happily. "Again, Miss Elara," a little girl begged with a bright smile. Elara laughed softly. "If you promise to finish your reading lessons afterward." The children cheered immediately. Months had passed since she left Ravenshade Manor. Here in Evermay, no one cared that she had once been a duchess. To the villagers, she was simply a kind young woman who helped teach children music and reading while assisting the orphanage caretaker whenever her health allowed. Life remained difficult. Some mornings she woke coughing so violently she could barely stand. There were nights when fever forced her to remain in bed for hours. But despite the illness slowly weakening her body, Elara finally felt emotionally free. No more lonely dinners. No more waiting for footsteps that never came. No more loving someone who could not love her back. Or at least, that was what she kept telling herself. That afternoon, while snow continued falling outside, Elara stepped into the courtyard carrying blankets for the younger children playing nearby. "Careful near the ice," she warned gently. A small boy suddenly pointed toward the distant road. "Miss Elara, someone's coming." She looked up absent-mindedly, then froze completely. A tall figure dressed in a black winter coat stood near the orphanage gates beside a dark horse carriage. Snow rested across his shoulders while icy wind moved through his dark hair. Duke Cassian Ravenshade. For a moment, Elara forgot how to breathe. The children noticed the strange silence and slowly backed away. Cassian stared at her, as though afraid she might disappear if he blinked. She looked thinner than before, palely beautiful beneath the falling snow, and heartbreakingly fragile. "Elara," he whispered. Her fingers tightened around the blankets. "What are you doing here?" The distance in her voice hurt more than anger. Cassian stepped closer carefully, as though approaching someone wounded. "I've been searching for you." Elara looked away immediately. "You shouldn't have." A painful silence settled between them while snowflakes drifted softly through the air. Finally, Cassian spoke again. "I know the truth." Elara's expression faltered slightly. "About the rumors," he continued quietly. "About Vivienne. About everything you sacrificed for Ravenshade Manor." She said nothing. "And your illness," he added, his voice breaking faintly. Elara lowered her eyes. So he knew now. Cassian took another slow step forward. "Why didn't you tell me?" A sad smile appeared briefly on her lips. Would it have changed anything? The question shattered him instantly because he knew the answer. At that time, probably not. Cassian looked down briefly, guilt crushing his chest. "I was wrong," he admitted quietly. "About you. About everything." Elara forced herself to remain calm despite the storm of emotions inside her heart. For years she had dreamed of hearing those words. Now they only brought pain. "You told me to leave," she whispered. "You looked at me, as though I meant nothing." Cassian's breathing became uneven. "I know. You never trusted me." "I know." Tears slowly filled Elara's eyes again, though this time they were quieter. "You only saw my worth after I disappeared." Cassian could not deny it. Every word was true. The proud duke who once terrified noble society suddenly looked painfully human standing beneath the falling snow. "I thought love made people weak," he confessed softly. "After watching my father destroy my mother's life, I convinced myself emotions only lead to suffering." Elara listened silently. "But losing you," his voice trembled faintly, "destroyed me far more." For the first time since their marriage began, Cassian lowered every wall protecting his heart. No pride. No coldness. Only regret. I love you, Elara. The words echoed quietly through the snowy courtyard. Elara closed her eyes briefly as tears rolled down her cheeks. Once, those words would have meant everything. But broken hearts did not heal so easily. I don't know if I can forgive you, she whispered honestly. Cassian nodded slowly. I don't expect forgiveness immediately. He stepped closer but stopped several feet away, respecting the distance between them. I only want the chance to earn it. That night, Cassian rented a small room above the village bakery instead of forcing Elara to return with him. The villagers watched suspiciously at first. To them, he looked exactly like the kind of wealthy aristocrat who caused suffering everywhere he went. But over the following weeks, something unexpected happened. The Duke of Ravenshade changed. Instead of giving orders, he worked beside the villagers personally. He repaired broken orphanage walls with carpenters. He carried coal through heavy snowstorms. He purchased medicine and blankets for struggling families without revealing his title. When Elara's coughing worsened during cold nights, Cassian stayed awake beside the fireplace preparing tea and medicine himself. One evening, Elara awoke after falling asleep near the piano. She found Cassian carefully draping a blanket over her shoulders. You should rest more, he said quietly. Elara studied him silently. This version of Cassian felt almost unreal. Gone was the cold nobleman who once hid behind pride and distance. In his place stood a man terrified of losing someone precious. Slowly, little pieces of her guarded heart began softening again. One snowy afternoon, the children convinced Cassian to join them building snow lanterns outside the orphanage. Elara watched from the window while laughter filled the courtyard. Cassian stood awkwardly at first, clearly unfamiliar with children. Then one little boy accidentally threw snow directly into the Duke's face. The entire courtyard froze in horror. To everyone's shock, Cassian laughed. Actually laughed. The sound was deep, warm, and unfamiliar. Elara stared at him in stunned silence. For years, she thought that part of him no longer existed. Later that evening, she found herself smiling without realizing it. But happiness remained fragile. That same week, a terrible snowstorm swept across Evermay. Freezing winds rattled the orphanage windows throughout the night, while heavy snow buried the roads outside. Several children developed fevers, and Elara insisted on helping care for them despite her worsening condition. By midnight, her breathing had become dangerously weak. Cassian entered the hallway carrying medicine when he suddenly heard a violent coughing fit upstairs. Fear gripped him instantly. He rushed toward Elara's room. Inside, she collapsed beside the bed, struggling desperately for air while blood stained the handkerchief covering her lips. Elara. Cassian caught her before she hit the floor. Her body burned with fever. Panic unlike anything he had ever known consumed him completely. For hours he remained beside her bed while the village doctor fought to stabilize her breathing. Snowstorm winds howled violently outside as candles flickered through the darkness. Cassian never left her side once. At dawn, the doctor finally spoke quietly. She'll survive the night, but her condition is worsening faster. Relief nearly brought Cassian to his knees. Elara remained unconscious for 2 more days. During that time, Cassian barely slept. He sat beside her constantly, holding her hand while guilt tore through him endlessly. On the second night, believing she still slept, he whispered brokenly, I would give up every title, every estate, every piece of pride I have, if it meant keeping you alive. A weak voice answered softly, then stay. Cassian looked up immediately. Elara's eyes were barely open, but she was awake. Emotion overwhelmed him instantly. I'm here, he whispered, gripping her hand carefully. I'm not leaving again. Tears filled Elara's eyes as she looked at him. For the first time, she truly believed him. Weeks later, after the storm passed, Cassian brought a skilled physician from the capital to continue Elara's treatment properly. Slowly, with rest, warmth, and care, her health began improving little by little. Spring eventually arrived in Evermay. Snow melted into rivers, flowers bloomed across the countryside, and sunlight once again filled the orphanage windows. By then, Cassian had made his decision. He reduced most of his royal obligations and appointed trusted officials to manage Ravenshade affairs from the capital. Instead of returning permanently to noble society, he chose a quieter life beside Elara in Evermay. Together, they helped rebuild the orphanage and support struggling village families. And for the first time in their lives, their marriage became real. Not built on duty, not built on politics, but on love, trust, and healing. One peaceful spring morning, soft piano music drifted through their countryside home, while sunlight spilled across the wooden floors. Elara sat at the piano wearing a pale cream dress, healthier now than she had been in years. Cassian entered quietly, carrying fresh flowers gathered from the village market. He placed them beside her piano gently. Elara looked up with a small smile. "You remembered." "I'll spend the rest of my life remembering," he replied softly. Cassian knelt beside her chair and took her hand carefully in his. For a moment, neither spoke. Then he whispered, "If you had truly left me forever, my heart would have remained frozen for the rest of my life." Elara's eyes softened with emotion. This time, when she looked at him, she no longer saw the cold duke who once broke her heart. She saw the man who crossed an entire kingdom to repair it. And as spring sunlight surrounded them, Elara leaned gently against him while the music continued playing softly in the background. At last, Ravenshade Manor no longer held the duke's heart. She did.